Welcome to Making a Mark, a podcast about leadership and practice in architecture. Join me, Mark Steppan, an architect with over 45 years of experience, as we explore opinions on leadership, soft skills, and their impact to the practice. We're lucky enough today to have Ben Kasdan, FAIA of KTGY, here to join us. And we're going to have a very interesting conversation on leadership in architecture, but we're going to talk about leadership in general. Ben is joining us from the East Coast, from Washington, D.C. He is a co-leader of their studio back there, and a high-density multifamily, affordable, lots of stuff that even I've done in the past. So it's an interesting connection here. He's spoken to a lot of different groups and events. He's been the AIA California president. He's done things with Cal Poly San Luis Obispo, AIA Cal Orange County and Los Angeles, and has just been very involved in things and made fellow recently. So congratulations on that.
Thanks, Mark.
I know how much work goes into doing that. So that's a great accomplishment and a good idea of respect from your peers about what you've been doing for the profession. So we're going to talk about leadership today, but I'm going to introduce you, Ben, and thank you for being here. Anything you'd like to add from your bio or intro standpoint before we get going?
Mostly just thank you for having me. It's been fun because we know each other sort of through AIA California and through colleagues and friends in common in AIA space. It's an honor. Thank you for having me.
Oh, you're welcome. It's great to have you here. So I wanted to talk about leadership. I think it's often thought about, but not very in-depth getting into situation of understanding and then how it affects our profession. And I think it's really becoming more and more critical as we keep getting more and more into the technology age about people skills. So what do you feel, or how do you feel that leadership means to you if you were just going to be asked to define it for somebody?
Yeah, it's such a simple question, but it's so important. And I think there's a lot of examples of what it is not. It's almost easier to define than what it is. And I don't think it's bossing people around. And it's funny because there's some pretty high profile leaders right now that are wielding this power and this bullying sort of aspects. And that is not it at all. In my opinion, leadership is about inspiring others, and it's about making those who have chosen to follow you the best that they can possibly be. I take the responsibility of being a leader as my primary mission is to make all of those people the best versions of themselves, whether that's professionally or personally or however that relationship is structured. And sometimes it's both. I just work really hard to try to inspire them to be the best versions of themselves. That's how I approach it.
Sure. So it's what we talk about. It's people skills.
Yeah. 100%.
And it's actually got very little on the surface, of course, to do with architecture.
Yeah.
It's about helping people understand themselves and the situations. It's us growing as leaders to know how to actually interact with them and putting ourselves in situations that we can actually be helpful and mentor and teach and give them places to grow.
Absolutely. And it's been an interesting journey to learn how you have to approach each person that you're mentoring or leading differently. There are definitely some patterns, and some people will relate in a way that's similar to another person, but everyone's different. And that's the challenge and fun of it too, in finding, all right, what are the ways to inspire this person that are different than that person or that person? And again, it's all relationship based, like you said.
And it's something we're taught, right, in school, how to do all this?
I wish.
Oh, wait. No. It's I wish I'd learned how to type properly in high school, but I wasn't really going to take the typing class. Home ec's important. There are these other skills.
It's hard to fit that class in.
Yeah.
Everything else they're doing.
It's true, it was, but hindsight, there are other things that would have been helpful. I think that most people are uncomfortable talking in public unless they're really extroverts and they've just gotten really to a point of understanding themselves and their comfort levels.
Yeah.
Which people do in high school, but it's still a challenge. I personally was very much an introvert. And so it's interesting to see how people are.
I think this is not a scientific study, but my informal observation is that a disproportionate number of architects are introverts. A lot of us are. And technically, I think I am an extrovert, but I'm a shy extrovert. Even
Yeah. And for me, for example, if I use myself as an example of changing over time from an introverted extrovert to a more comfortable person that's just comfortable in my skin and talking to people and things. I remember early on in years at Fisher Friedman participating in prep for interviews for projects and doing stuff. And I was so nervous and I just not comfortable talking to people that I didn't know. Perfectly comfortable talking to people I knew. But in those situations, my hands were shaking, my voice was shaking. It was like I couldn't remember anything, those kinds of days, right?
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. And now it's much more comfortable. I still forget things, but it's okay to be a little nervous. I remember because I play a lot of golf. So I played a lot of tournament golf. And I remember being so nervous some of the time. My hands were just shaking on the first tee and they announced my name and now playing from Oakland, California, Mark Steppan. Let's give
Cool.
a round of applause and then you tee off.
Yeah, then you got to
Whatever.
stand there and all the people are watching in the
Yeah,
gallery.
and Jack Nicklaus always had a saying. He goes, if I got to the first tee and I wasn't nervous, I knew something was wrong because I wasn't really excited to be playing and participating and competing.
It's a really
So
good
it's
point
interesting.
because, the things that matter and
Right.
your body knows that physically, which is interesting.
Yes. We're complicated and very interesting beings, let's say, very complicated brains. I'd say you've been a pretty successful leader at KTGY and people have been following you and have high regard for you. But have you seen changes, actually specifically at KTGY, and how leadership has evolved either for yourself or for others that you're witnessing over time?
Yeah, KTGY is an interesting organization because a lot of architecture firms pyramid to one person or a partnership of a couple or a small group. And KTGY actually came out of a firm like that in the early 90s, where it was two partners in common. That old firm partners, they had a disagreement about succession, and the outpouring was CYP dissolved and KTGY emerged. And those four letters actually represented six people who have all long since retired. So I'm in the third generation of leadership at KTGY, and because KTGY was founded in that way, it's provided much more opportunity for people to grow like me. I started KTGY fresh out of Cal Poly, which is a little bit crazy. It was my first job. I think I told myself 1 year tops, and I'm pushing 23 years now, which is awesome. But because we didn't all have this like strict hierarchy to one person, we all were purposefully but almost accidentally given these opportunities to lead. And at a young age, I was leading projects, and it's a little bit of sink or swim around here. And if you swim, then just run with it. And at the beginning, I was totally winging it. Like you inferred earlier, they don't really teach this stuff in architecture school. They teach you how to think about solving problems with the design process, but not really about leading people or projects or coordinating with consultants or talking to clients or cities or whoever. But early on, I recognized that I wanted to learn more about it. And I actually used the AIA as a tool to learn some of these skills and learn from others outside the firm. And I loved learning. And I got lucky enough to find some opportunities with AIA Orange County. And then that beget to some opportunities with AIA California. There's California Council back at that time. But and then I cross-pollinated it. So, the things I learned from the president of AIA California and AIA Orange County and then the other leaders that I was able to bring back to KTGY, and then vice versa too. So some of my mentors at KTGY, I would bring those ideas forward. And I just kept trying to get better all the while. And at the beginning, what I was leading was my little project. And then my little team. and then my medium-sized studio, and then I just kept growing, and I just didn't stop learning. And so I know I'm not exactly answering your question specifically, but the point I'm trying to make is just I still have more to learn. And someone along the way, one of my mentors at KTGY told me very early, just always try to learn. There's a way to learn something, and that applies to everything. So design and
Yes.
architecture, as well as leadership and managing and coordination and presenting and all those things. And I would like to think that I still have more to learn. And I honestly get excited when I learn something new. And so I continue to do that. And so I hope that the people that I'm leading today are witnessing the fruits of that investment in my own education, and that I'm able to inspire them to keep learning too. And so I passed on that lesson as much as I can as well.
Yeah. No, actually, I love the answer. And these questions are really to just propagate thought, right?
Yeah.
And I've interviewed one or two people that were like, "Oh, these questions really made me think." I hadn't thought about what I was really doing, but oh, I was actually doing a lot of these things,
Yeah.
but not some of these things. And so it's been interesting doing the interviews to see what people think and how they might have changed their practice based on their growing understanding of what it takes to be a leader in architecture and how they're leading people. So yeah, that was really a good answer. And I think that what gets created is you're creating a culture of, hey, I'm learning, I'm still learning, I'm helping you learn. We're all in this together. We're a team, right? We're collaborating. I want your engagement, but I want to hear from you. There's all these little aspects of things that start to be pretty subtle that help buy in the engagement. It helps buy in the participation. And then I think what happens, and you could probably speak to situations where you've actually seen this, is the buy-in helped create a more fun environment. And frankly, the more fun you have with this, the better emotionally you are, the better mentally you are. Oh, what's the byproduct? You actually do more work up to your potential.
I couldn't agree with that statement more. And it's funny, I look at the work that we've done over the years, and I can see when I look at the built form of these multifamily projects, I can see when we're having fun designing it. And I can see when we weren't, when we were struggling through it. And somehow you can see the struggle in
Yes,
the
right.
design. And you can also see the joy in that process, which is maybe a whole nother podcast topic in unto itself, of just the joy of the process of design, and maybe the opposite. It's super interesting. And you're totally right. Like that, the process itself is almost worth doing it alone. But then it also does all the other things too, as a more deliberate product.
Right. If we create an environment, if we create the space that allows people who don't know as much as we are, that we're trying to mentor, that we're trying to bring along and teach them things that we've learned or that we're still learning, then we've created, others call a safe space, right? Where people can ask questions. Asking questions, that's a really good thing, right? I had basically one main mentor early on at Fisher Friedman, and his point was generally, don't come to me without a question, but if you have a question, great. Don't worry what it is, but also come to me with solutions and ideas and thoughts, and then we can go through them, right? Don't just come to me and go, oh, where do I go for this answer? Because I don't want to tell you where to go for the answer. I want you to be thinking about where to go for the answer. And then we'll work through it and navigate it or whatever it might be. But if I just give you all the answers, you're not learning almost anything. And then what am I here for? Oh, I'm just an encyclopedia telling you where to go. That's not how this works. So it was an interesting direction.
It's good advice. It technically does work. It just doesn't work in making you better. It just gets that task done.
Yeah. And honestly,
Which sometimes
sometimes you just have to do, hey, This is
Yeah.
the answer. We can discuss it later. We
Yeah.
can discuss where it comes from later, whatever it might be. I really got to get this work done now. So yeah, here's what the answer is.
Yeah.
But knowing how to say that and how to give the opportunity for further follow-up is also what a good leader can do instead of not doing that. Do you think there's any differences between how your guys' studios performing and acting on the East Coast and the West Coast?
It's funny because in my perspective, no, but I only know what I know and I don't know what I
Right.
don't know.
Sure.
And the way that the Cameron and I, my co-shareholder on our studio here in DC, run our studio is pretty much exactly the same way that we were running it in the studio that I was involved in Irvine. And so to me, it feels very similar, though I recognize I might be biased. And part of the reason why our CEO, Trisha, sent me and my wife, Marissa, who runs the research and development studio at KTGY to DC, was to make the culture of the firm more connected, more seamless than it was. So from my perspective, I don't know anything different. But I don't know what it was like before exactly I got here. Though I say all that. Every office has their own
Of course.
flavor.
Yeah.
But we're all ice cream and we're all delicious. It's just some are mint chip and others are
Coffee
yeah.
or Coffee Road.
The personalities and studio space and the environment. And you could ask a similar question about the typology too of what we're doing. I'm doing the exact same kinds of buildings, and in a lot of ways the buildings are the same. The nuances, again, like just in the flavor, like the materials we use are a little bit different here than there, and the waterproofing details are a little different because we have freeze thaw cycles. And so it's not that different in my opinion, though. I don't know, you might talk to someone in the Oakland office and like, no, we're totally, I don't know, maybe I kind of want to ask them that now too.
One would hope. I guess how I'd look at it is each studio is going to have some kind of fashion of the individuality of the leadership, right?
Yeah.
And so you're going to take on some of the traits and the points of view and the approach.
Yeah,
which
I think that's
could
right.
be similar in culture to everything else because it should be.
Yeah.
But it also should have its own identity.
Yes.
So you don't want to just be mirror images of everybody.
It's true. I think that's a much more eloquent way of putting it than my clumsy ice cream metaphor.
No, I don't know. Now you may be hungry for Haagen-Dazs coffee. You talked about this a little bit, did you have an actual real mentor in your first 10 or 15 years that you relied on a lot that has really helped formulate who you are?
I've had lots of mentors. There's a couple that come to mind. The scary thing is I had mentors for all different aspects of my life and several professional ones. David Senden comes to mind, who now leads the LA office. And we probably worked together the longest in a row. And then before David Senden, there was David Obitz and Stan Braden, who was a past chair of the board of KTGY. And they all taught me different aspects of architecture and just different aspects of leadership. I think David Senden gave me the most design freedom, I would say. And he was the one that kind of pushed me out of the nest, like, all right, go see if you can fly. And that means a lot. But then I had several mentors in that same time with AIA. I was mentioning how I cross-pollinated my professional life with a volunteer service. And there were several people, both other architects and then staff people. It's hard to talk about serving in AIA California Council or California without mentioning Paul Welch and the faith that he put in me at a very young age is amazing. I don't know what he saw in me, but it was pretty inspiring. And then his direct mentee is Nikita Stevens, and she did so much for me, so much of the time, even till today. She will still help me with things that even across the country. And another person that it's hard to imagine my life without the impact that she made is Janet Itzen, who I lived next door to her now husband, William, in my first year at Cal Poly. And it was funny because I knew him as Billy. But in the first year syllabus, there were all these drawings by William B. Itson. It took me a few months to realize that the Billy next door was William B. Itson.
Okay.
And then, so I became friends with him first, and then he was like a mentor. Then we started dating Jana, and Jana and Billy, no William, graduated a year ahead of us in school. And Jana was working at KTGY as her first job out of Cal Poly. And she came back to Cal Poly at a job fair and convinced me and my then fiance, who's now my wife, to practice interview at KTGY. She was like, it'll be a good experience. And so we practice interviewed and we got practice jobs and all the things. And then it was Jana who was the chair of the Orange County Associates Committee and said, hey, come to this meeting. And I showed up to the meeting and she said, by the way, now you're the co-chair. And then a few years later, when she was the VP of the Academy for Emerging Professionals at California, she called me again and said, hey, you should run for this position, which was the Young Architects Forum regional director for Southern California. And so Jana more actively shaped the steps of my life, and everything she told me to do was the right decision. So anytime Jana told me to do anything, I would do it. No, she had so much of my best interest in mind even before I knew what it was. That kind of selflessness in being a mentor is the kind of mentor that I aspire to be for all the people that I mentor now.
I'm glad you are doing that. It's hard to do,
Super
but
hard.
it's really important.
Yeah.
So while you're talking that history and the mentors and the relationship of AIA to the firm or a firm, it was making me think of, my growth, both from a comfort level in public settings to being asked for the AIA East Bay chapter by the then executive director, Sydney. Oh, we have this great professional practice forum, and I've seen you and I've heard all about your experience in the practice of architecture and all this other stuff. I think it would be great to share this because nobody else is really stepping forward. And I'm kind of like, oh, okay, sure, all right. So I jumped in with both feet and both hands, and then I chaired that for 7 years, and it was a lot of fun. And it was very educational. And we brought a lot of people in that could help educate a lot of people in a lot of different topics. And then she was like, you really need to be on the board. I'm like, no, I don't need to be on the board. I don't have anything to offer the board. Come on. And she's like, no, you really need to be on the board. And I'm like, okay, I'm still on the board. This is 12 years later.
But you had something to contribute after all.
And I had something to contribute. And then, of course, I was fortunate enough, if you want to look at it that way, to be president when Sydney unfortunately left in the middle of the year. And then we were just stuck with all kinds of situations. And it really helped me also grow as a person and as a leader to figure out how to basically save the chapter from going tank. And then it solicited all this support from Paul and Nikki and
I think
leaders in LA.
I think that's when I met you.
Yes.
Yeah. In that process.
Yeah. And it was like totally challenging and disturbing. And I had to get up that Christmas for the party, the member party, and grab a cordless mic, and I'd written down some things I wanted to say. And I was like, I can't do this. And I stand up in front of this huge throng because everybody wanted to know what the hell was going on with the chapter. And I just ad-libbed it for 25 minutes and got 3 people to want to become part of the board during that event because of that speech. And so, okay, I do have some influence. People are following me because of good things that I'm saying and the approach that I'm creating. So it was very interesting to sit there and go, oh, these other people had this faith in what I could be, right, before I did. And that makes good mentors.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's interesting, just the nature of architects. If you put out a problem in need of solution, and you're thoughtful in the way that you frame the problem, like architects typically will step up to try to solve. And that's what I love about us as a species, if
Sure.
you will. And I remember that time and learning about it from Paul and from Nikki that East Bay needs a lot of support. And I know that they were so thankful for you and others and stepping up in that moment to literally save the fate of that chapter. And now it's thriving and connecting it back to my life. So my current mentor, my supervisor, is Jill Williams, who's a longtime kind of managing partner of the Oakland office. I remember in that moment, she, who had been agnostic to the AIA, she'd always been a member, would attend events if they were interesting. But I remember her noticing, like, hey, AIA East Bay needs our support right now. And she was supportive of her staff serving on the board. I know Ashley Beck joined, and she, when identified as a problem, she stepped in. We're an East Bay firm too, and we need to step up and support. And so I'm sure there are several other firms. I think T Square is probably one of them, I'm guessing too, and others, and such a small world. And I forgot that story until you were telling it just now. That was like the origin story of how we met. And so that's cool.
Yeah. And it was super rewarding. And it again, it had nothing to do with architecture. It was solving a really critical problem with people skills.
Yeah.
And having support and other people to come along and join in. It was not necessarily a time I wish to repeat 100%, but
yeah,
it was a really good learning experience and very worthwhile. Do you think that there's like a singular experience you've had over your career that stands out to you about leadership? It's hard, and this has been hard for everybody to go, I don't know if I can have one, but see what you can come up with.
The singularity of that question makes it a little bit daunting.
Yeah.
I think the answer is probably no, there wasn't one moment, but I recognized pretty early on that my sort of empathy and inclusivity that I just had. I don't know if my parents taught it to me or if I was born that way. I just care about people, and that translates into people wanting to support what I was doing. And so the moment that I thought about when I heard that question is actually before I was an architect. This was in high school, and this is going to sound very nerdy, but I was in marching band. Maybe you would have guessed that. And I became the drum major of our marching band, and we were a pretty competitive marching band in the state of California. And I became drum major as a junior, and it was a little bit scandalous because there was a senior who became like the co-drum major, and so the senior versus the junior, there was like tension there. And I don't think I strategized this. I just thought it. So like we would have these things that we do, especially in our kind of end of summer practices, where for like 2.5 weeks, we would have these practices literally from 8 a.m. to 6 p.m. It was really fun, but it was pretty intense. And if people were late, we would assign them like push-ups as
penalty
punishment. Or if you did anything wrong, like you get push-ups. And somehow I thought of this thing that like, it was gonna be hard enough for me to like get the attention or the kind of respect from a quarter of this marching band based on my age alone. And I thought of this thing where like I would just do the push-ups that I had to assign to everyone else. That was part of my responsibility as drum major when I was elected, was I was responsible for administering this punishment. And so if I had to give someone 20 push-ups, I would do the push-ups also
along with them.
And so every punishment, now I got really good at doing push-ups, but somehow it took 2 days and people were like on my side, and I overcame that whole thing. And I wish I'd been more strategic about it and thought that this was some grand plan. Honestly, I just thought it was a way so that they wouldn't complain to me. That was like the practicality of it. But I just realized that in that moment, and I was 16 years old, that empathy goes a long way. And so if you lead with empathy, it's easier to get buy-in.
Oh, totally. That's one of my key words. I like that. I was not in a marching band. I was in symphony orchestra and a stage band while I was in high school and junior high.
I think most architects, apart from also being introverts or shy, are also musicians.
Yeah.
That's a whole nother podcast for us too.
Yes, and the fact that I started playing the trumpet again. So yeah, there's that too.
Very cool.
So soft skills, empathy is, excuse me, very strong component
Yeah.
of a soft skill we have to develop. What are some of the other ones that you feel are critical? It's a one-word test kind of thing.
Leadership, in my mind, is directional. And I almost used this analogy earlier too, but you have to know where you're going. And it doesn't mean you have to have all the answers. That's not what I mean. But just have a sense of what are we trying to do here? And often people who like to boss other people around also don't seem to have vision for why they're bossing people. The idea of it is my sort of outsider view of watching some of those leadership styles. And so I think having some vision is easier to get people to buy into that idea because there's purpose that's inherent in that vision. And it's not that you always have to be right and you can't change your vision or modify the goal or reassess or pivot or all those things. And I think all those things I just said are also important too, pivoting and reassessing and reevaluating and recognizing when you're wrong. But to me, those all tie into that vision and that you're rowing the boat in a direction. You're not just going through the motions. You're going through the motions to get to a place.
And you're going through the motions as a team, as a group together.
Yeah.
Crew is a perfect example of a team that has to work in unison.
Yeah.
Part of the reason I think it's one of my last slides in my webinar on leading vulnerable and complex projects, because it's all talking about soft skills and all these relationships of things that allow you to help navigate situations that are potential risk creators and vulnerability evidences. As Simon Sinek talks about it, there's the infinite game.
Yeah.
Because architecture is really an infinite game.
Yeah.
There's an end, really, maybe not. And there are goals getting there. But we can't be short-sighted. We can't think it's a finite situation. And I think part of what I think comes out of what you're talking about, the poor leadership qualities and not exhibiting vulnerability and probably actually having shame about their situation. There's all kinds of other aspects of things that we could get into relative to what Brené Brown talks about on vulnerability and shame and a variety of things about leadership. The people that are picking on other people and don't have the long vision are talking about a finite game that has this short end, and they're not understanding there's a big picture. And there's a really big picture. And we're like the wall, that wall behind you to the side of that image keeps going. Really, it just keeps going and going and going. But we're dealing with part of it. And I think if we can make that travel plan, let's call it, known, then we can get buy-in that continues. And that's just a lot better.
I love that you brought up Simon Sinek. He's so good at distilling into like simple metaphors and the sort of the content that he's putting out now is about friendship, which is really interesting to me, and kind of the importance of maintaining friendships into your adulthood. Like it's so easy to make friends when you're a kid and you're at school and you see each other every day and all the things. And it's so hard to maintain those friendships. And he is talking about that today in terms of like the mental support for leaders that you need, that support group of your friends and your family too, I think is encapsulated in that idea too.
Sure.
To keep you on path. So you have that vision and they're objective enough to check you on your biases and your accountability for like making the right decision in the right times and all those things. And it's not surprised that he inspires you too.
Yeah, no, I remember back when I watched his Start With Why TED Talk. MBBJ actually had all the partners and the principals at the retreat up in Seattle, which was like a 3-day thing. Everybody had to watch it. And I had no idea who Simon Sinek was. I didn't know what they were talking about. It's only 18 minutes long, but it was got to be one of the most inspiring things I've ever watched.
Same. And then it's funny because I think I saw it for the first time at the first ever. Yeah, I could be wrong on the first ever, but one of the first, let's just say the first ever because that's a better story.
Okay.
The first ever KTGY leadership annual leadership meeting, and our CEO Trisha showed us that video, and I had never heard of him either. And it was so amazing that how transformative that little 18-minute video is. And,
Right.
and even when you revisit it now, it's still so inspiring.
Yeah. And so that led me to start paying attention to more things about people and leadership and what helps people work together as a more seamless group. And so I still have a lot to get better at relative to leading people and understanding this thing, because we have biases and it's really hard to get over stuff sometimes. But I thought his examples were just so on point about the differences between the approaches and the points of view and the goals that the people had. And yeah, there's the golden circle, but what's your why? That's what I was talking with leadership at my last firm, where I was doing coaching sessions, and it was like, what's your individual in the firm? What's your why? What do you think the firm's why is? Do they work together? Because you have to understand some of this to help understand where you might be having struggles or why you might be having disagreements or things that are maybe just subconscious that are making it more of a challenge. So.
Love that so much. Yeah.
Yeah. So we've got about 20 minutes to your deadline, your stop. We still have good time. There are other words that I think do fit what a good leader has to work with. They have to have respect and empathy, and they're different. They have to deal with honesty, transparency, openness, all these words that are about skills of listening, learning, and taking a breath before responding to. It's not a word, but people are giving you a tough situation. You don't immediately start responding because you haven't had time to figure out the best response. So
another one I throw in there is integrity, doing what you say, and even when even no one's looking, doing the right thing if given the chance.
Because you don't know who's looking at you.
Also true.
I wasn't thinking about people snooping, but if you're in an office and let's say you have an open office, and you should be setting an example about how to communicate with people. That means with people in the office, on the phone, via email, via text, whatever it might be. It's like everybody is a marketer for a firm because you always have some form of contact with the outside world. So you're always marketing your firm, whether you know it or
maybe especially when you don't know it.
Yes, there's that. Good point. And so I think a lot of, certainly the younger folks wouldn't have a clue that's the case, but it really is the case. But in an open environment, if people are listening to, and a lot of the offices are open environments, wow, it's a great opportunity for somebody to learn how, let's say, to have a tough conversation with a client or a consultant, or what words to use and the approach and the tone and everything. It's also a really great opportunity for you to screw up.
You can learn what not to do also.
Show what not to do, right?
Yes. And I think a good example of leadership is recognizing, acknowledging, owning when you feel short, and when you are that example of what not to do, and not trying to pretend like it didn't happen, to pretend like you're perfect, because no one is perfect, and having the humility and the integrity to say, no, I should have done it this way, and like, how can we do that better next time? Is it asking for help? Can you help me in that situation next time to do better? Or some of those leaders I mentioned earlier have exhibited that kind of self-awareness and that kind of humility for me. And then that's honestly very powerful and very inspiring too, because it's impossibly perfect all the time. And it exhibits that eagerness to learn and to improve and to get better. And again, going back to our conversation, that's a fundamental trait of leaders, in my opinion, is
Yeah.
to continuously learn.
And I think the other thing that you're talking about, that we've talked about, is we've shown, or the leaders have shown then, that they're vulnerable. They're putting themselves out there. They're allowing themselves to be open to comment and improvement, criticism and suggestions, and that it's okay to be vulnerable, right? And so that means it's okay for your staff to be vulnerable, because you'll respect them in their vulnerability and you work together. But if you don't show that, they're not going to feel that they can show that. If you're not going to give them safe space to do that, nobody's going to do it. If you're not going to give safe space to ask questions, because you got to get the deadline in, you just got to do it. There's a lot of young people who have come up to me in the past after classroom sessions, and I'm like, oh, thank you, this was great, because I finally got to ask a question. I'm like, what do you mean? You can ask questions at any time. And they're like, oh, no, we can't. Our deadlines are too much. We feel like we can never ask anything because it'll like mess up the deadline. And my boss is telling me, or my PM is telling me, no, head down, do the work. But I don't know what I'm doing. But they don't ask, I don't know what I'm doing, because they're not going to get a good reply, because that person's not really a good leader. So that's really sad.
Sounds like a finite game.
It is a finite game. Totally true.
Yeah.
So something that's not finite, that is definitely apparently going to be infinite, that we should close with, is a little discussion on how do you think AI is going to affect the profession from a standpoint of leadership and people. There's how is it going to affect the work we do? Yes, and that'll have an effect on how we lead people. But how do you think it's going to change things?
The metaphor I'm running with right now is, I'm old enough to remember when I was first coming into the profession was the switch from like hand-drawn to AutoCAD. When I was a summer intern at Langdon Wilson, we were like transitioning. I started my first summer, everything was hand-drawn, and I learned how to airbrush and all these like really analog things. And then my second summer there was a sort of a palpable shift where we drew the drawings in AutoCAD now, and then I airbrushed a print. And then my third summer, we were coloring all digitally and we're drawing completely. So like I watched that transition, and it's separated by the school year. So there was like a shifting of the gear. And so I watched that, and then I was in the profession when we transitioned from like 2D to 3D with SketchUp and Revit and BIM and all those things. And from like the actual practice perspective, I just think it's another tool. And so that's the transition I see coming. Though I think it's much better at doing the manual tasks. Like I would love to get AI's help to go through my emails, because I get so many buried in emails. But I'd love to see it do that. Like I'm way more interested in it doing that than doing like a density study for me, because what these like instantaneous density study tools, they're just a fat pen sketch anyway that we could have done in the same amount of time with fat pen. You still have to like then figure it all out. So I'm not sure those tools really are saving us time. Yeah, I don't think so though. Where I think the power comes into is you're taking those things that the architects aren't good at. So architects are really good at synthesizing and taking the programmatic goals and translating them into plan form, and translating that plan form into three-dimensional space and form. I'm not convinced that AI is going to be great at those synthesizing and like connecting the engineering disciplines with the spaces that we're designing in but I do see some potential in doing those sort of tasks, like keeping track of our business development opportunities and tracking the data of project finance and in regional nuances. Like our office is the only KTGY office on the East Coast, so our region is like East Coast time, and then some. And so there's a lot of different places, and seeing like, all right, where should we be focusing. If you're talking to me a year ago and asked me where our opportunities are going to be outside of the DC, Maryland, Virginia immediate market, I would have said Charlotte. But that doesn't seem like it's the case today. Maybe it's not. So I think using the computer to analyze data that's hard for humans to analyze, that's where I think the power is. But I think architects are so good at architecting in a way that AI can. And the other piece that's interesting, I'm not really answering your question at all, though, is I think architects are valuable for our liability insurance. I haven't seen an AI have professional liability insurance. And I think that's the main thing developers hire us for, if I'm really honest. Yeah, there's a side product that we design amazing buildings and spaces and provide them a huge amount of value. But I don't think they always see that potential. I think they see a risk mitigation of fire. So it's a long way of saying, I don't know.
I think that it's really interesting to hear everybody's viewpoint. And obviously we don't know, right? It's a long game. We don't know where it's going to go. That it's like we went to CAD, we went to Revit, 3D, whatever. They're all tools to help us accomplish something that, frankly, only people can accomplish. And that's the ability to listen to situations and conditions and requests and project needs, things that aren't said, that are unspoken, but they're hiding in there that they haven't been able to say. How's AI going to know that? How are they going to know what this person is saying? Are they going to understand tone? Are they going to understand bad language because somebody's speaking English as their third language, and yet they have to get their needs and desires across to you so that you can synthesize them into some kind of solution that's creative, and every situation's different. I think it does have some potential to be very helpful in a variety of ways, but it's like the repetitive task way and the way that our brains don't work and other things. We've done a test with it at Studio T Square about a design toolkit thing we came up with. It's a ever expanding office standards, but all the answers to everything thing that we created. So how do you have AI give answers? What's the code requirement for this and that and the other thing? And you can have some of those prompts in there.
Yeah.
But the answers aren't always 100% right either. And you have to be able to understand that they're not always right.
And there are instances where different parts of the code or ADA versus the code aren't compatible. And it takes a human to sort your way through all that.
So it's going to be interesting. I do think that understanding how to incorporate it, because it's not going away, is going to be a real challenge to the leadership to understand how that impacts how they work with staff, who then will be much more experienced in understanding how AI can work, but not knowing how it should work within the profession. So we're working at two ends of things to try to
totally right.
make it work in the middle.
It's going to be a fascinating next few years, decade.
Yeah.
Until the next transformational technology shows up. It's been lovely chatting with you about leadership and architecture and everything. So again, just thank you for having me. And it's been just a pleasure to think about leadership and what are we doing and why. And so I'm excited to see who else you have. And now I want to listen to your crew coach podcast.
I'm going to thank you again from the East Coast, Ben Kasdan of KTGY, FAIA principal and co-leader of the Washington, D.C. office. So thanks again, Ben, and we'll chat again. Thank you all for listening to Making a Mark, where we continue to expose, emerge, expand, and empower the practice of architecture. We look forward to seeing you next time.